Hey, so let's recap Grimm Season 4, Episode 3, called The Last Fight. It takes place in a boxing ring, and we're introduced to two new Wessen. So the first one's called the Schinderdief, and this one is the main boxing promoter, the guy named Stan Kingston. He looks a little bit like James Earl Jones, and he's really pushing his fights, and he's pushing this guy Clay to keep fighting even though he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to box anymore. And the reason he doesn't want to box anymore is because he is a Wessen called a Hiftigorok, which is a Wessen that's kind of like a bull, and they have like hard hands and hard heads that are good for fighting, but they don't like to fight, or they're like hesitant to, or it's not in their nature to. And so Stan, the Schinderdief, is the opposite. He is like a tough bull, and so the Schinderdief has horns on his chin, and it uses them to punch holes in his victims, which Nick learns in his book in the trailer is the exact type of wounds that we find two of the victims in. And the first one is a guy who was paid by Stan to beat the crap out of Clay in order to get him provoked for the fight, because only when you provoke this Wessen. He kills him because, he got beat up, broke his jaw, and he was threatening to reveal what Stan was doing. And so he died, and then when Abe started questioning it, Abe is Clay's trainer, he died also. So Nick and Hank are actually really good at the beginning solving this crime without Nick being Grimm. They're suspecting Wessen, and they, check alibis and do all this background stuff. And they're actually doing a pretty good job. The last piece of the puzzle is the Wessen part, and that's when they have to bring in Trouble. Nick's really hesitant about doing this because he really doesn't want to get her in danger anymore. He's really acting like a father throughout this entire episode. Well, the father thing has been progressing, like we see him acting very paternal towards Trouble. She's like totally cool with it. She's like, oh yeah, give me the phone, I'm ready to go. And she actually ends up killing the guy accidentally by snapping his neck. But you know what? Trouble's awesome. Normally, I really don't like her character just because it's very bland and it's very one-sided character that kind of doesn't care but totally tough, and it's pretty on the surface for Trouble. But today we got to see her like, oh yeah, I used to sleep in a boxing ring and I actually know how to hold myself. And she was having like a real conversation with Clay. So the twist at the end was that the mom was actually the one pressuring Clay to do the fights. She set it all up, and she actually started beating him because she wanted him to fight and she wanted him to be famous and get money. But once the Grimm showed up, she tried to kill him. Then he raised the club and was almost going to beat her, but then he didn't, which was really good because Trouble got to him, and he made the right decision. So that was great. It's kind of getting into emotions, and so I'd like to see a little more from Trouble. We may get that, because at the beginning episode, we find out what Chavez wanted. She wants her to join the group that she's in, which is obviously something to do with attacking dangerous Wessen. This could be the Resistance, it could be some sort of anti-Varrots thing, it could be, it's just a ragtag team of people who fight dangerous Wessen like Grimms do. And they want Trouble to join because they know she's a Grimm. But they let her go. Chavez didn't hold her captive for very long. She just wanted to tell her what her options were. And she didn't tell Nick about this. So it's going to be up to her to make her own decision about this. So also from last episode, we know that Nick started seeing what Adeline was seeing, and at first he doesn't know what the hell's going on. And so Juliet's like, we're taking you to a doctor, and Wu is becoming extremely suspicious because he was there, and he was asking about Trouble, and so that, plus Nick's crazy breakdown in his eyes, Wu is seriously suspicious, and he's not trusting Nick. I have a feeling he's gonna confront Nick again next episode, or he's gonna do something. So we find out from the eye doctor that Nick has a fourth cone in the back of his eye, which apparently is a rare condition in some women that allows them to see invisible colors to the normal human, because usually humans only have three cones, yellow, red, and green, I think it is, and some, there's a blue, yellow, and green, I don't know, anyway. So, some overlap colors, and it allows them to see other things, and it's very rare in some women. And so Nick's like, well, I'm a freak, and it's like, Nick, you knew that, you're a Grimm. And, Juliet's just thinking this entire thing is so scientific. Her immediate reaction is, let's go to the hospital. Honestly, I don't understand how they didn't assume that this had something to do with Adeline from the get-go. Hello, he just got his Grimm powers taken away, he was attacked by a Hexen beast, of course this has to do with Adeline, duh! Why are we going to the hospital? They don't know anything. But the eye doctor said that there's some swelling in the area that's preventing light from getting to that, which is obviously the scientific way of saying Nick can't see those things anymore, he ain't a Grimm, and we got some sort of scientific explanation as to why or what happened to him. Now, the mystical, magical explanation of what happened to him is explained in the Monrosalee and Sean Renard and Hexenmom's Elizabeth story. So they invite Hank over to talk about how they're not giving up, and then Bud interrupts, and they end up telling him that Nick's not a Grimm anymore, and he's like, oh no, don't worry, I'll keep it quiet, but, I'm going to go home and not tell anybody. They assure him that nothing's bad with Trouble, she's a friend of Nick's, everyone's okay, but Nick's not a Grimm anymore. So, I don't know, Bud's a pretty blabbermouth character, so it may spread, which is bad news. But anyway, so Monrosalee goes to the hospital to talk to Sean Renard, but he's too sick, and his mother's like, you're not leaving the hospital bed, you're not well enough. And so Elizabeth, his mother, offers to come with them. Now, Monroe is extremely nervous about this and scared, and Rosalie is, in awe. So, both of their specific reactions, come out really well throughout this entire episode as they, are around this Hexen beast who, is so experienced and she knows so much, and she's really creepy. Also, I'd like to add that there was, maybe a costume malfunction in this episode because Rosalie was wearing, bright red in her shirt, and, it's kind of a thing that bright red is not a great color for Bloopbod, it gets them kind of wild up, and so that's why usually Monroe and Rosalie both wear very earth colors, like whites and greens and browns and big sweaters, not blouses that are stark red like what Rosalie was wearing in this episode, but, maybe they're in their honeymoon phase and, they needed a little jump in the afternoon, I don't know. So Monrosalee and Elizabeth go to Adeline's little garage, they find the potion and it works, it turns her into Juliet for 2 seconds, they find the book that won't open, and then she stabs herself with a knife and blood opens it, and then boom boom boom, she's, got the spell, and so they go back to the spice shop to try to recreate it, to try to counteract it. Rosalie's really determined, if we don't have it, I'll get it, we can get this done, we can do this. Then we get a shot of the guys outside in the truck, and they got masks on. They're wolf black masks, and we don't know if they're, from the Virat, we don't know if they're from the Resistance people who hate mixed marriages, we don't know if they're after Elizabeth, the Hexen beast, we don't know if they're after Monroe and Rosalie, but they're at the spice shop, so, unless they know that Elizabeth's there, they've been following her, they're after Monroe and Rosalie, and everyone's like, what's gonna happen? We need next episode. So speaking of Hexen Beast, Adeline did something very, very stupid this episode. She trusted a stranger in her jail cell. Now, if you've seen Aladdin, you know this is not a good idea to escape with a guy who tells you how to get out and how to get what you want, because it's usually a trap. And so she eats his food and able to move the stone and escape with this guy. Now, we know the next episode she returns to Portland, so it's kind of a good thing that she escapes because her storyline needs to move forward, and it can't if she's sitting in Victor's cell. But, lesson is not to escape with strangers who are really old and crazy and locked in a cellar. So next week we're going to get new Wessen from a Jewish folklore. We'll probably get a little more explanation into Nick's problem, probably going to get some woo action, and we'll find out who the people with the masks are and what happens to Adeline.